Good morning. Thank you for joining us on The Lid. Today we'll be discussing one of the most famous playwrights of all time, Arthur Miller, and The Death of a Salesman. So today let's go around and introduce the panel.
Hi, I'm Johnny Glendenning. I'm a student at Exeter West Greenwich.
I'm Adam Croyan. I'm also a student at Exeter West Greenwich High School.
I'm Jared Prendon. I'm also a student at Exeter West Greenwich High School.
I'm Leah McIntyre, and I'm also a student at Exeter West Greenwich.
And I'm Dave Liberty. I'm also a student of Exeter West Greenwich.
And I'm Colin Stevenson, your host for today. So, just to give you a brief overview of The Death of a Salesman, it starts off with Willie Loman, who is a salesman. He is starting to age, and he's starting to go a little crazy. And he believes that he is the reason for his family's failure and his son's failures. So, the context of the book is a lot of themes and conflicts that ultimately lead to his suicide. So, that being said, let's discuss the characters first.
Like Colin said, the main character is Willie Loman. He's a 63-year-old salesman. And also an excellent point that Miller used in while writing the play was making his last name Loman, so low man. And throughout the play, he's always just trying to, get ahead in life, and he's never really been that high up salesperson like he wants to be. He's always been that low man on this totem pole.
So his name is representative of one of Miller's themes.
Exactly. And then there's Linda, who is Willie's wife.
It's alright.
Willie's wife, and she always has to deal with him because he goes into these episodes where he's in a flashback, or he's just imagining what could have been, and he just goes into a state where he doesn't know anyone's around him, and she always has to put up with him, and she's always been supportive.
So she's like his nurse almost.
Almost, but he doesn't quite need to be babysat as much, but she just has to put up with his quirks and all that. And then the next character would be Biff. He's Willie's oldest son. He's kind of a nobody. He's never really done anything with his life. He's kind of always been this grew up in high school. He was the star, but after that he didn't really do anything with his life, and that's because he had a dream to go to college. He was going to make something out of himself, but he caught Willie having an affair with a woman on Linda, and so kind of just crushed him and left him with nothing. And then there's the other son, whose name is Happy. He's only a year younger than Biff, and he's kind of the dreamer of the family. He's always coming up with these schemes. There's one point where he has a scheme with his brother that they're going to go to Florida and open up their own traveling sporting goods show where they play and sell equipment.
It seems to me that Happy is an over-the-top representation of his own character. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a fair point to make. I mean, he kind of just always has these grand schemes. He wants to become, he's kind of like Willie, where at the store he works, he's an assistant salesperson, I believe, or
assistant to the regional manager.
Right.
Get it right.
Yeah, get it right. And he's kind of I can go up all that ladder, just like Willie's trying to do. So it's kind of a common thing amongst his family. And another character would be Charlie. He's one of their neighbors, and he's everything Willie's not. He's successful. Willie's always having to take a loan from him, but Charlie feels bad for Willie and always offers him a job. But Willie is a very proud man and thinks he's a way better man than Charlie is, and never accepts it because in his own mind he feels like he's better than that louse Charlie.
So go ahead, John.
All right, I was going to say that I think that actually it's kind of a representation of how Willie is as a character, because he'll constantly borrow money from his neighbor, but he won't take a job from his neighbor. He's too proud of a person in the sense that he knows, in the back of his mind, he thinks one day I'm going to pay this person back. But if he takes a job from him, it's kind of a permanent thing that kind of, I guess, changes the chemistry.
Yeah.
And that's something to really think about in the representation of Willie.
Yeah, I feel like Willie, he's afraid to accept reality, and he just never wants to admit when he's wrong. To me, it seems like
he's chasing a dream still.
Yeah, exactly, David.
All right. Well, another character would be Bernard, and that's Charlie's son, and he's also Biff's one of Biff's best friends growing up, and also much how Charlie is the antithesis to Willie. Biff Bernard is, because Biff, he failed high school, he's roaming, he's working out the West, he's like went to jail for a period of time, he didn't do anything with his life. Whereas Bernard, he's married with 2 kids, he's a lawyer who's going to appeal in front of the Supreme Court. You know, he's like just like Charlie is to Willie, Bernard is to Biff. He's the antithesis. And then there's Ben, who's Willie's brother. But in real life, hasn't seen Ben since they were boys. Like since Willie was very young, and he went off to the jungle to go diamond mining. When he came out, he was rich. He wanted to take Willie with him to Alaska to also like make his fortune there, like get even richer and make Willie rich with him. But Willie refused because Willie wanted to be a salesman. And he appears in Willie's flashbacks and like in his daydreams, and he's always like had that representation of Willie's regret for not going to Alaska and what he's left his life as.
So even though Ben is a character that doesn't actually appear in the play as a physical presence,
Yeah.
he is one of the most important characters in the book because he represents so many things in Willie's mind.
Yeah, like he's there right when at the end when the death of a salesman occurs. You know, when Willie kills himself, he's right there. He's right alongside him, and he's like, "There's I believe the quote was that the jungle is dark, but there's many rewards," or something along that lines, and saying like, death is a dark place, but there's great profit to reap, especially with Willie's life insurance policy.
Yeah, and we'll definitely cover that when we get back to that.
Yeah, and then the final character I'm going to talk about is the woman. And now she's never given a name, but she's Willie's mistress. And for me, she represents his guilt because she's kind of there in the beginning of the play, kind of saying, "Oh, you're going to buy me all these things. You're going to buy me all these things," and he can't even buy those things for his family. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
And he can't even buy those things for his family. And then and also, like, he thinks Biff's only messing up out of spite, but in reality, you know, it's because of Willie's apparent mistress.
I think that they never gave her a name because Willie is trying to box her out of his memory.
That's
Yeah.
But he's not able to.
That's
That's a
actually
very
very
good
nice.
point.
Whoa. That's an astute observation, Adam.
Yeah, that is a very
Vocabulary.
good point to bring it down. I think that means a lot. But I think that's absolutely a perfect representation of why they don't give her a name, because Willie is trying to forget about her and trying to move on from the mistakes he's made in his life and try to correct these mistakes. So, themes in the Arthur Miller famous play.
All right. Basically, the themes that we have going on right here, I guess it kind of results back to a conflict or whatever. But one of the main themes I found was the theme of the American dream. The American dream, guys, it's like basically the way it's depicted in the book is basically to grow up and live like the normal American lifestyle. You know, come home, have nice house, and have like the normal American luxuries. And basically, the thing is, Willie's chasing that in himself by trying to be a salesman, trying to be profitable, but that didn't really work. And also, his son Biff was trying to be like this big football player, and he's going to go off to college, and he's chasing his own American dream, his own version of it. But that kind of failed for him as well. Another thing I found as far as like theme goes, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but Willie kind of lives like a lot in his mind, like in his imagination, where he has like imaginary figures for everyone. As you stated earlier, like he's got his imaginary brother. It's his real brother, but like in his mind, he doesn't actually know him. He only knows him like in his head. And he also like calls his calls his kids by like Greek names like Adonis and whatnot, like because they're like good wholehearted characters. And so he's trying to depict that onto like his real life. So that's basically the themes I picked up on. I don't know about you guys.
All right, so we'll discuss more themes when we come back. So, again, we'll be picking up where we left off with the themes. So, Johnny, you mentioned something about the American dream and how that theme in the play is one of the most important.
Yeah, I definitely think that pertains to the entire book as a whole, because it not only applies to Willie, the main character, in like basically his drive to do whatever, and basically his motivation to, you know, be a salesman and, you know, try to like just go through his life. That also applies to his kid.
Let me hold you right there. So, before we discuss more on the American dream, what does everybody here think the American dream really is? What is your interpretation of the American dream?
Well, I think it's like, you know, you want to grow up, be like successful, have like a good job, kids, just all around be a good person as well. And I feel like that's what like Willie's trying to do, is he's trying to chase after that American dream, but he's never going to really succeed in getting it.
I definitely think that what David just said, because you want to be like well liked and have like a good reputation and be able to provide for like your family and everything too.
So you think that the American dream is to develop a reputation as a well-liked person and to basically support a family?
Yeah, so you can
Go
be
ahead.
like well known. Yeah.
That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, well, like almost like what they said, everyone wants to be famous and rich, and you know, everyone wants like what Willie is chasing. To me, is almost the American dream, but he's more like, I want to be rich and well liked by everyone, but I don't care what I sacrifice along the way. Like he doesn't really care if he sacrifices his family almost, because he's always talking about another salesman who he defined as like the successful salesman and what he wants to be, but he wasn't married.
And he wasn't happy with his life, even though he did seem successful.
Yeah, exactly. He like what he wanted wasn't what he had, but you know, to get there, there are some things he'd probably end up having to give up.
Adam?
To me, the American dream, I feel like it's often associated with like owning a farm, and I think that's because when you own a farm, you're kind of self-sufficient and you're able to provide for yourself and provide for your family. And I feel like that's really associated with the American dream, is being able to live on your own and provide for yourself and for your family. So that's how I see the American dream.
Yeah, so I guess throughout the book, you see the multiple interpretations of the American dream, and Willie's is that he wants to become a salesman and make his living selling things and providing for his family. And everybody throughout the book has a different interpretation of what the American dream is. So
Absolutely. Everyone here had different interpretations. So
Absolutely.
same
So
kind of
that is kind of a gray area to discuss the American dream as a symbol, but it does, each person can have their own interpretation. So I think that really is an important part of the book, that the American dream isn't a set thing. So, on that note, conflicts.
Okay, so there's a ton of internal conflicts within the story. I would say there's probably 3 main internal conflicts, and 2 out of the 3 pertain to Willie. But Willie and Biff both have intertwining internal conflicts because, as Jared said earlier, Biff found his dad cheating on his mom with the woman, which was Willie's mistress. And he, up to that point, he was a football star, like you said again, but he needed to pass math to go on to college, and that was his goal. And it seemed like he wasn't going to be able to, but his friend Bernard mentions to Willie that he was fired up. He was going to be able to pass math. He wanted to work at that.
And he needed to get past the exam and have a chance to pass math, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And he went to Boston to tell his dad about how he was going to pass math and go on to be a football star. And when he went to Boston, that's when he found Willie cheating on his mom with the mistress. And he gave up. At that point, that's when he gave up on life and he stopped trying in math. And I wouldn't say he gave up on life, but he definitely gave up. He did not want to try in math, and that resulted in the failure of his football career. And that resulted in the reason why Willie seems to think that Biff is a failure his entire life. And I think that all stems back to Willie. Even though there wasn't all that much external conflict between the two at that point, I think there was still a ton of internal conflict within Biff. And then Willie, on the other end of that, he is in denial that he is the reason why Biff is a failure. Like he knows deep down inside that he is the reason, but he refuses to admit it, which is like I said about Johnny. He's in denial for a lot of his life. He doesn't want to admit when he's wrong. But he, yeah, I mean, it seems to me like there's a ton of internal conflicts within Willie about just Biff and how he is responsible for his failure and how he doesn't want to admit that. But there's also another internal conflict within Willie, and that's Ben. And although Ben is a whole other character within the story, he is not physically there. He's only in Willie's head, which means that would be an internal conflict. And what Ben represents is he represents what Willie could have been if he had been successful. Because Ben was successful and he didn't work all that hard. Like he didn't spend his whole life working. It was a pretty short amount of time. Yeah, like a luck of the draw type of thing. While Willie's been working his whole life, working hard, but he hasn't been able to achieve that success and get the riches that Ben had. And Willie inside does not want to admit that he's a failure, but I think he knows it in a way. And Ben is his representation in his head of success, and he himself is failure. I'm not sure if you guys agree with that or disagree with that, but that's just how I saw it.
No, that's
Let's-
a pretty accurate
okay.
representation.
There's also like external conflicts as well, like between probably like the biggest one is Willie and his family. Just in general, there's between like each individual, there's some type of minor conflict between them. Like the biggest one is like with Biff and Willie. Obviously, like you said, it was like he found his dad cheating on his mom, and like Biff has always kind of resented Willie after that, and like you said, like he just didn't he just gave up. And I kind of it's like you kind of feel bad for him, but like at the same time you almost want like Biff to be like grow up, and like you shouldn't just throw away your whole life just because of that. But yeah, and then probably another conflict is between Willie and his boss, because when he loses his job, he kind of feels like he lets down his like family and like the dream that he's been chasing this whole time. Like all that time he spent just went to nothing. And basically, like they both kind of like symbolize like he like wants to like do good for his family, but like deep down he knows he's not. So he's just like in a constant struggle between his boss, his work, and his family.
So not only does Willie have all these internal conflicts within himself, he does have external conflicts with many other people, not just a few people.
Yeah, there's many people. Like I said, his whole family. Like sometimes like he's just unhappy with his wife.
Like for instance, one of the major turning points in the book, or the climax of the story, is the argument with Biff and Willie at home.
Yeah, and when they're fighting, it shows like that, like how much resentment Biff actually has towards Willie for that day in Boston.
And I said before that there wasn't much external conflict between the two. I meant at that point in time when he found him, there wasn't all that much. But later on, Willie is on Biff about being a failure. And when I meant it's an internal conflict, I just meant at that point in time, it was an internal conflict that affected the rest of his life. And then Willie and Biff had a ton of external conflicts later on in his life, because that's all a flashback. The Biff finding Willie cheating on his mom, that's in the past, back when Biff was in high school.
And also, Biff idolized Willie. Like Willie was Biff's could do no wrong. Like Biff wanted to be just like his dad, and then to find out your hero is human after all is just crushing for him. And then and so once he realizes that, he doesn't know what to do, because he was going to college because he wanted to be like his dad. He wanted to be a success because his dad's spinning all these stories about how everyone in Boston knows his name and how everyone in all these cities loves him and all the buyers want to buy from him. But now he realizes his father isn't that man.
Yeah, it also shows with the jobs he wants. Like Biff, he wants to own a farm and be free, but before that he wanted to be a salesman in major cities and stuff. So it kind of shows after what happened in Boston changed how he thinks about his dad's life and how he wants to change that and be different.
I feel I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like you could point out any character in the story and there would be almost any character, and you could find some external conflict between Willie and that character. I just feel like he's out to
Well,
get
I mean,
everybody.
again, Willie is the main character of the
Yeah.
story, so
That-
you
that
He's
obviously
gonna have some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, on that note, I have a question for everybody, and in particular Jared, because he brought this point up. But do you agree with Biff that Willie is to blame for the failure of Biff?
I personally do, yeah. Because all throughout high school, he let Biff sell for mediocrity outside in the classroom, and just worried about, hey, be the popular football star, be the popular kid that all the women and kids adore. And then when Bernard's trying to warn him, say he's failing math, he won't graduate. And then Willie just says, do you want our son to be a little rat like that, or do you want to be the successful, popular guy? And then, you know, at the end it turned out to be in the reverse, where Bernard is well-liked and successful, whereas Biff is the no one.
So what does everybody else think? Do you think that Willie is responsible for the failure of his own son?
I feel like he is, but at the same time I don't, because I feel like Biff, I mean, even though what happened, I feel like he shouldn't have just gave up like that. I feel like it's kind of like too harsh for like himself, really, not to be successful, especially when you have that much potential. But at the same time, I understand. Like, I mean, it's like a tough thing, and like not wanting to fall after that, like with all that resentment towards your father. I mean, yeah, I can see it. I can see that.
So what do you think, Leah?
I think yes and no, because Willie should have led him in the right direction in the first place, but then Biff shouldn't have, like David said, given up, or he should have tried harder. to
So you
prove
think
it.
that Biff is almost using the excuse of Willie's affair to basically illustrate his own failure, and that he should really control his own destiny, and that he shouldn't place blame on Willie for that.
Yeah, because Biff is responsible for himself,
So he holds the key to his own future. That's
basically.
what you're saying. That's a good point. Anybody else?
I 100% think that Willie is to blame for Biff's failure, because Bernard directly tells Willie that he was about to put in the work that it would take to pass math, up until he went up to Boston and caught Willie cheating. And I would say that, I mean, it doesn't really get more clear than that. I think he would have been able to pass math if he had put in the work and the effort. And if that was the case, he would have gone on to college and maybe have become a football star. I mean, there's no saying for sure, but I think that definitely is a possibility.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
would, I'd probably blame.
Yeah, I think it's pretty transparent that Willie's to blame. I mean, as Adam just said, like he was going fine, and all of a sudden Willie does something bad, and then just all hell kind of breaks loose. Like he goes from being really hyped about taking his math exam, something bad happens, and then he just goes on a downward spiral. So
On the other hand, though, I understand what they're saying. How I think it speaks to Biff's character a little bit that one like shred of bad, like Johnny just said, could have sent him into that spiral. So I do think it speaks to Biff's character, but I just believe that Willie had put him in that position to end up failing.
So it seems like to me that this side of the room feels like Biff controls the key to his own destiny, and that although Willie's mistakes did play a little bit of a part, that ultimately Biff is looking for an excuse to place his blame on his failure on somebody else other than himself. And this side of the room believes that it was 100% Willie's fault.
yeah.
All right. Well, when we come back, we will discuss the important symbols in the book.
Reported southbound on Highway 9 on Highway 9.
911, where's your emergency?
We're back. So, on that note, symbols in the play and important objects. Leah, what do you think?
I have 4 of the top symbols that I thought. The rubber hose resembles like Willie's attempt at suicide by inhaling the gas at his own home. There's the jungle, which Ben told Willie that the jungle's dark, but it's full of diamonds. So
Now, he says this Well, Ben himself doesn't say this, right? It's in Willie's mind
Yeah.
when he's in that final car ride to basically kill
Commit
himself.
suicide, yeah.
So, yeah, that's an important symbol, I think, that the dark jungle represents death, and that in death he can find something.
And it makes him think that his life hasn't brought value to like other people. The car is Willie's attempt and failure to reach the American dream. So I portrayed that.
So the car could represent Willie's journey through his life in trying to achieve success.
Exactly. And then the last one I had was seeds in the garden that he planted. And he wanted to plant the seeds and hope that when he died, it would bring something. And like,
So ultimately,
You know what I'm
the seeds are almost like Willie's death, and that after Willie's death, just a seed will become something even better.
then he was, yeah.
If I could just say something, I think that the garden represents a ton of things in the story, one of which would be what you just said, Willie's death, but I also think it is a great representation of Willie's children, because I think he says something along the lines of, I have nothing to plant, so I'm going to go plant. I think that garden represents his children in that he thinks his children are failures, and he wants to start again and just like do all he can to basically like just start over, if that makes sense.
Mind blown.
So his death is the seed, and the flower or the final product is the life insurance and the effect that it will have on his family.
Which I also think is represented by the diamonds that she said in the jungle with the diamonds. The diamonds would also be, again, like the fruit of his suicide, which would be like the life insurance policy.
So in the darkness or death, there is something positive to come out. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I guess more symbols.
That was.
That's
Okay.
I think.
Well, I mean-
Oh, you can go.
No,
Yeah.
you go. I cut you off already.
I feel like his symbols overlap. Like the rubber hose, we didn't really spend too much time talking about it, but that represents how close he was to just ending it and committing suicide. That he was right there, which is also shown again when he actually does go and commit suicide with the jungle and the diamonds, which again that symbol overlaps with the garden. So I feel like all of his symbols seem to be overlapping.
But also, the toes, just because this brings it to my mind, is that in the scene when Biff and Willie have that final confrontation, Biff pulls it out and puts it on the table, and Willie just denies everything about wanting to commit suicide. He's like, I've never seen that before in my life. And he acts all nervous, and, you know, that's just kind of like Willie's character to me, though, is that he's always in his life like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. You know, oh, that hose that I want you to commit suicide, I've never seen it before. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't think he wanted to show his real feelings about like how he felt about himself.
Exactly.
He didn't want to show Biff his I guess internal struggles and himself and his thoughts on himself. You know, he's already caused Biff enough pain, and he doesn't want to see him suffer again. So, on that note, do we think that Willie's death is an honorable death, or do we think that it's low for him to commit suicide? Like his name states, he is Willie Loman. So.
I mean, that kind of relates to the question I was going to ask, which is like, what do we really think the death of a salesman is? I mean, it's the title of the book, so it has to have some significant meaning. It's not just going to be some random thing. I mean, take an example, just Harry Potter. It's named Harry Potter because he's the main character. There's going to be some significance to it. And personally, if I had to answer that question, I think Death of a Salesman, it's kind of, again, where it goes back to what I think the American theme is, where it's kind of just, it's something that he can, it's something that he looks forward to. He thinks that Willie's in a mindset that he thinks having an honorable death is like something that he strives for. And basically, the death of a salesman, it's a nice, honorable, quiet death. That's what he kind of thinks it is. Yeah, so basically, I don't know if anyone else has any.
Now, when you say honorable death, on that note, is the low attendance at Willie's funeral something that represents a bigger picture, or is it just somebody had something else on their schedule and decided not to go to the funeral of Willie Loman?
I think that's kind of
they
like
wanted to watch the Celtics game or the Detroit Lions game.
No one's watching the Lions games. Nobody. But basically, I think that's kind of just like a little little irony there by Arthur Miller, because he builds up the death of a salesman as this big honorable thing, but then he finds out that it's not, like, nobody really cares, nobody really shows up, and that's kind of just like sad clown.
So, final opinions on the book before we wrap this up.
Thought it was pretty good.
I really liked the book. I thought that Arthur Miller, or the play, I'm sorry, but I thought Arthur Miller did a really good job of portraying characters in the way that he did. I thought it was overall a really well-written play.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good book. I mean, play. Like, I mean, it kind of just brought to light what everyone's saying. Like, everyone is chasing the American dream, whether they realize it or not. And Miller believes it's dead, and he did a good job portraying how he feels that way in this play. I don't think it's dead, but he did.
I agree with Jared 100%. But it has to do with the American dream.
I
Well said. Well said.
I like the play. I like the way he portrayed the themes in the book through the ways that he did, and like the conflicts and stuff that went throughout the book, and like how they like intertwined. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think Arthur Miller is a talented playwright.
I agree with you. On that note, Death of a Salesman, thumbs up.